practice being loud while we're on top of the world. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come around the room and I'm going to point to you. And when I point to you, I want you to yell as loud as you can at the top of your lungs. Let's harness that energy we got inside of us, all right? Go! 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 Volume. And let's all say a beaker. I want you to yell out your answer, beaker. What tool do we use to measure volume?
Beaker! Go! Beaker!
Go!
Beaker!
Alright. So you guys get how we're going to do this? In this class, we will be loud and...
Loud!
Okay, you guys are awesome. Hi everyone, welcome back. This is Jeff McAlpine, the 7th period teacher, continuing our series on classroom culture. And this is lesson 102. We're continuing our behavior styles chat. We're going to do 2 more lessons directly on behavior styles and the mindset behind that. And then we're going to go ahead and get started on the more practical, how to set up a great classroom culture using what we've learned about behavior styles. So today we're just going to focus kind of in depth on the structural types of behaviors. And so we're going to look at the analyzers toolbox today, and we're going to look at managers and the assertiveness today, and just kind of dig in depth a little bit on, spend a little bit more time on those behavior styles. I want to repeat that these behavior styles are not my idea. They come from the Effectiveness Institute out of Seattle, Washington. It's a great way of looking at people, personalities, and behaviors. So just a quick review from last time. We had the analyzer teacher, the stabilizer teacher, the manager teacher, and the persuader teacher. And that corresponds to tools, relationships, assertiveness, and engagement. And we need to be comfortable rotating our iceberg and rotating our behaviors so that we can be all 4 of those teachers. You can't be all 4 at once, but you got to know which behavior to show at which time in a classroom. And that's the idea, right? We want to be able to show all 4 behaviors, and so we need to develop habits that allow us to show those in a classroom, even those behaviors that are less comfortable for us. And to grow those, we need to practice. And we have to have what's called a personality growth mindset. Out of the mind of Carol Dweck, she talks about growth mindset. If you have a personality growth mindset, instead of saying, hey, I'm an introvert or an extrovert, you would say, I'm an introvert developing my extrovert behaviors and my comfortability in those. Okay, and so that's what we're going to try to do as teachers, is we're going to try to develop our more uncomfortable behaviors that are very necessary for our students to learn. All right, so here's my iceberg again. We're digging into analyzer behaviors, which I'm very comfortable with, and manager behaviors, which I'm not so comfortable with and I had to develop over the years. We're going to start with the analyzer. So that's that tools teacher we talked about. If you talk to them about, if you went up to them and said, hey, what should I do to create a good classroom culture? Their response would be, I've got 1,001 tools and all these amazing things you can do. And they'd probably be pretty overwhelming for you as a first-year teacher, because analyzers, we got a lot of tools in our toolbox. But remember, for every strength, there's a downside to it. And if you just focus on your analyzer behaviors, you can come across as dry, stuffy, boring, and cold, structure over people with not a lot of assertiveness. And so we need to develop the other behaviors as well. So an analyzer, their strengths are using facts, data, logic, taking lots of information and putting it together. So they see a lot of the little details in things. And they're usually about quality. A lot of perfectionists, they're very comfortable with their analyzer behaviors, and they tend to give well thought out opinions. Analyzers tend to sit back and think and think and think, and usually it's at the end of a conversation when they give their opinions, because they've been trying to put all that information together. So even though an analyzer sits back and they're very quiet, it doesn't mean that there aren't wheels turning inside their brain. They think on the inside rather than others that think on the outside. Now, a lot of analyzers that are comfortable with that behavior tend to be very much into rules and routines. They don't like to break the rules too much, and they tend to be very self-disciplined people. Keeping in mind, I know I'm putting analyzers in a box, but keep in mind this is an analyzer behavior. Even someone that is very comfortable as an analyzer, like myself, has all 4 of those different behaviors, but it's going to be really hard today to not refer to people as analyzers or stabilizers or managers. So just keep in mind when I say that, I'm really talking about people that are more comfortable with those behaviors. Now, when an analyzer gets stressed out, there are certain tension reaction behaviors, things that they tend to do. So they'll tend to nitpick or try to prove they're right. right? They don't tend to show a lot of emotion, and they tend to pull back. They're the ones that, if there's conflict, they tend to want to go away to their room, want to get away, take time, process it, and that's really what an analyzer needs. The intent of an analyzer is to be thoughtful and thorough, to try to be perfect, taking their time and seeing all details, but sometimes as analyzers we come across as sort of anal, indecisive. We tend to be seen as worrying a lot. We tend to be seen as distant or antisocial. A lot of the times an analyzer will sit back and people will mistake them sitting back as being prideful and full of themselves, when really they're just sitting back and thinking about things. Every behavior style has an intent, and sadly that intent sometimes can be seen in a negative light, and so that's the unintended impact. So for each behavior style, there are certain judgments we make about them. It depends on your most comfortable behavior. So for example, if you're a manager and you're on a team with an analyzer, you tend to see that person as just giving way too many details. That person's talking, and you just want to get things done and get out of there. Right? So that's how managers tend to judge analyzers on a team. Now in a classroom, a manager would say, hey, teaching's a lot easier than you're making it out to be, right? There's too many details, you're trying to make it too complicated, you're just wasting your time. Teaching's easy. And so that might be how a manager judges an analyzer. You'll notice that the manager, the color is red. There tends to be a lot of conflict between managers and analyzers in their viewpoints, because managers want things quick, analyzers need things slow. And so there can be some tension between the two. All right, next, how do analyzers judge other analyzers? Well, the thing is, they tend to be pretty simpatico, right? One person's into details, the other person's into details. And two analyzers talking about things, they could go on for hours. The one thing though is analyzers tend to, they're perfectionists and they've spent years perfecting their craft, and so they tend to be really skeptical of other analyzers and their thoughts as well. So it's not that an analyzer will accept everything another analyzer says, right? But on a team, they like to share things back and forth. And in terms of teaching, even though they'll listen, in the back of their head they're thinking, oh, my tools are so much better than your tools. And so that's how they tend to judge. Stabilizers and analyzers tend to also get along really well. And here's why. Analyzers love to share their tools, right? And stabilizers love to emotionally connect with someone. And so when an analyzer is talking about their tools, the stabilizer is loving it. But the thing that tends to happen on the team is, even though the stabilizer and analyzer, they tend to get along really well, the stabilizer doesn't take the tools and use them in their classroom, right? They're just, I was glad I was there to listen to you. And so there tends to not be a lot of action taken by that stabilizer. And in terms of teaching, they tend to think all these tools and all this structure is not needed. You just need to love kids. And if you have a great relationship with kids, you don't need all that crazy stuff. And that's how they tend to judge them. Finally, persuaders and analyzers do not get along at all. They tend to be polar opposites, right? So I'm thinking of the odd couple, right? The one person that organizes their sock drawer to be in certain colors, right? And then we've got the persuader who is just throwing their socks wherever they want. Persuaders just aren't run by those details. And on a team, the persuader doesn't really want to get into business so much. They don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So they tend to stop listening, they'll divert the subject. Persuaders tend to bring like work in and things they have to do so they don't have to sit and listen to someone for so long. So they tend to focus on something else, and then later on they're going to go complain to everyone that you wouldn't stop talking, right? Now in a classroom, this is a big deal. Persuaders tend to neglect the structures and the tools that they need in their classroom. They think, I don't need it, it's a waste of time, I'm just going to entertain kids. And as a result, that fun turns into kind of a mess. Anyways, that's the judgment lens. Now, we don't want to look at these behaviors through judgment. We want to look at them through acceptance. And we need to learn to practice these behaviors even though they feel uncomfortable, or in our mind, we may be thinking, that's too much, I don't need it, different tools, I don't want to use that, structure over people's not good. But without analyzer tools, right, your classroom isn't just going to be that perfect place that appeals and helps all kids. And so here's what we got to do. We got to look at analyzers through a forgiveness lens. For example, managers. You got to accept that, hey, sometimes the details are important. Efficiency is important too, don't get me wrong. But you got to slow down and see the details, or otherwise your efficiency turns inefficient in the long run. And so you got to forgive those analyzers and stop And we always say, rotate to your analyzer behaviors and listen carefully. If you're an analyzer, your tools aren't perfect. I'm sorry, my tools aren't perfect. Your tools aren't perfect. We need to learn from each other and give people a chance. Give other analyzers a chance to share and try using their tools. As a stabilizer, now, here's the thing. If you're a stabilizer, I know you're having this great conversation with the analyzer, you're loving it, but what I need you to do is rotate and get out a piece of paper and write some of their ideas down. Write them down, make that list, and you can show you love somebody by trying some of the things that they're actually asking you to do, and then going and talk to them about it later. And so that's gonna kind of push you to action. And you gotta know that relationship building in a classroom without structures and process, it just doesn't work. It's very inefficient. You gotta marry those two together. Finally, persuaders. Just winging it's gonna hurt kids. I'm sorry. There are polar persuaders I've seen throughout the years that don't have any structures, any tools in their classroom. They think everything's going wonderful, but when you look at what's actually happening in a classroom, a lot of kids disconnect. You have to have those structures in place. So learn from your analyzer friends, right? You can do it. Look, some of the greatest partnerships of all time have been persuaders and analyzers. Some of the greatest conflicts of all time have been persuaders and analyzers. But when they learn to get along with each other and learn from each other, great things can happen, okay? Because as analyzers, we tend to take ourselves too seriously. And a persuader can convince us to just have some fun too, okay? But it's gotta go both ways. So that's our forgiveness lens. And finally, this is just kind of a parting note on this. We talk about WOWD when we talk about behavior styles. That's a way out with dignity. If you have an analyzer friend and they are stressed out, something bad's happened, right? They're going to their tension reaction behavior, they're nitpicking, they're withdrawing, you have to help them. And what we do is we help them by giving them a way out with dignity. And so for an analyzer, when they're upset, they need time and they need space to process. When I'm upset, I withdraw. All right, I go to my room, I write things down, I need time to process and think about things. And so that allows an analyzer to have that way out. Analyzers are not great on the spot with conflict. And so as a manager, you can be beating up an analyzer, telling them how much they're wrong, and that analyzer is really suffering. They need time to get away, they can't deal with it in the moment, they need to think about things first, okay? And also, sometimes people see analyzers as dumb because they sit back and they overprocess and they don't share as much. Realize they're incredibly intelligent people. They don't want to say everything that comes into their head. They need to think about things first. So don't expect them to talk first. Wait for them to talk last. And when they talk last, usually they say some amazing things, okay? Trust their ability to come up with good decisions over time. Don't force them to make decisions quickly. That's the key. Now, in a classroom, an analyzer tends to be blueprint focused. So I'm taking this kind of a car analogy, right? They're into designing the car. And there are so many different analyzer behaviors that are needed in teaching. If your analyzer is low, you're gonna have a really rough time starting out as a teacher. Okay, I mean, this is a long list, and this is just some of the things that I could think of that fits with that analyzer behavior, right? Like giving clear and organized directions. As an analyzer, you break things apart into step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and you don't tend to miss the details in those steps, okay? All procedures tend to be analyzer based, right? I mean, I said earlier, I have 18 steps coming into a classroom. And I need all those steps, and my kids follow those steps, and they go efficiently and fast through those steps, and it allows our class to start well. And I'll share those later with you guys. Any sort of planning, unit design, year-long design, lesson design, analyzers are usually really good and great with that. And there's so many more things here, so many more. We're going to spend some time practicing some analyzer behaviors. I'll share my gigantic toolbox of tools I've developed over the years. And so we'll take a look at some of these later on. You know, you really need to learn how to do these things well by an analyzer. And so I'm excited to be able to share that with you. All right, so next we're turning to our manager side now, okay? So you'll notice I'm pretty low on manager. I've had to learn over the years how to fake really well being a manager and being comfortable with it. And so I'm gonna be sharing some of those with you. And this is the thing, if you're most comfortable behavior as a manager, you're gonna think a lot of what I'm sharing is like, no duh, right? I just do that naturally. And that's great, that's wonderful. You'll need to spend less time on that manager behavior. But you also gotta be cautious, right? as a manager, if you go too far in one direction, you go from being assertive to being mean. Okay? And so some of those lessons on being an effective manager can kind of help you out with that. All right, so managers as well are process over people. Okay, when you say you need to be seated, it needs to happen now. Follow the step, please. You'll notice I'm not being that nice, comfortable person. Hey guys, let's get started. This is awesome. Hey Joe, have a seat, man. Yeah, I'm so excited. That's not going to get your class started efficiently, right? So we have to have that quick manager style to get our kids to do what we want quickly. And thinking back to that teacher we learned about before as a manager, they're forced to be reckoned with, right? They're the ones that might say to you when you go talk to them, don't smile, don't smile. Well, that's actually pretty bad advice when you're not being a manager, right? But when you are being a manager, smile's not a great thing. You have to have sort of that straight face. And so that is good advice when you're doing manager behaviors in a classroom. But if you spend the first 2 weeks of school just to being a manager, I feel sorry for the kids in your class. This is you all the time. Get out the book, open to page 4. We're going to do question 1. Ready, set, go. That's not really appealing to kids. It's not appealing to adults either. In fact, it pushes them away, and we have to remember that we're advertisers for how important education is. And if a student comes to your class and all they learn is that education is a cold, you got to do this, got to do this, got to do this, then we're not going to appeal to all kids, and that's what we need to do. All right, and that's kind of the idea, is that as a manager, you can end up being labeled the mean teacher, right? And you make quick decisions on the spot that aren't always the best decisions. So let's take a look at managers. Let's sort of dive into this. So managers, they tend to thrive in quick decisions, and they're good in conflict because they can think really fast. If you are married to a manager, you know it. They win pretty much every single debate you have, right? They make fast decisions, they accept challenges. If there's a crisis, go lean on your managers. They're really, really good at that. I used to work for someone that was really high up on their manager, and there was a fire at the school one time, like a whole wing of the school caught fire. And the amount of decision making and how quick and how that crisis was managed was just commendable, right? I mean, we're 5 minutes into the fire and I'm sitting there going, what do we do? What do we do? Let me look at all the details, right? And the managers already go, we got 5 people doing different things. So they're really good at that. They're good at adapting to change, right? They're good at taking action. And if there's an obstacle in the way, managers are great at quickly overcoming those obstacles. So it's a powerful behavior to be good at. However, when there's tension, our managers tend to, there are some things that come out of our managers that scare some of us. They tend to explode, blame, dictate, take over, and they tend to suppress their emotions. Now, managers thrive on being in charge, okay? Because when you make quick decisions, you end up in charge. So a lot of school administrators tend to have manager as their most comfortable behavior. And so if you've ever been yelled at or someone was dictating and taking over as a school administrator, there's a lot of tension there, and they're reacting and they're using their manager reactions. And that's not a great thing, because that ends up with long-term repercussions and conflict with staff members. So if your most comfortable behavior as a manager, you got to learn to control that tension reaction behavior. So the intent of a manager is a very powerful, positive thing. They want to be a strong leader. They want to be quick and efficient. They want to make good decisions, and they want to get excellent results. And if you've got a good manager in charge, and that's great for a team, right? They're going to be able to make sure that stuff happens. But here's the problem. Sometimes managers, right, if they're too comfortable in that behavior, they tend to come across as controlling, cold, disconnected, harsh, and not personable at all. And that's not a great thing for a team. So what ends up happening is what we call Diet Coke parties. So you have your team, you've got people all together, there's the manager in charge, they're doing their manager thing, and the other 3 are stabilizers or persuaders and analyzers, and later on they go and they sit in a room and they drink Diet Coke away from the manager and they complain. Oh, they're so cold, they don't care, they're so mean. And that's not a great thing. So as a manager, we need to learn to rotate and show all sides of our personality and our behaviors. One thing I want to mention, I would pause the screen. If you have someone that you're trying to work with and you're certain that they're stuck in that manager behavior mode, take a look at some of the suggestions on this page right here. These come from the Effectiveness Institute, and usually I read these when I'm working with someone, that I know as a manager, and it tells me the best way to go about things. Okay. I mean, if I'm working with a manager, I'm not going to sit down across from them and say, hey, how's your day going? Let's talk about your family. They're not going to want to do that. Unless you have those conversations ahead of time where, okay, look, I know you're comfortable with your manager behavior, but we gotta do some stabilizer behavior first. Okay? Those are the conversations that we used to have when I was a PLC coach that got people really to open up and be happy teams that didn't need Diet Coke parties afterwards. Pause the screen, study it if you need to. You can go back to the analyzer, kind of rewind back to analyzer, pause that screen if you've got someone that's an analyzer and you don't quite understand them. And so these screens can be helpful, but the focus of this series is not on getting groups and teams to work together. All right, that judgmental lens, here we go. So if you're a manager working with another manager, you'll notice it's green. They tend to get along because they understand each other's behaviors. However, here's the problem. You cannot have a team with two managers that both think they're in charge. You're gonna end up with lots of conflict. So you have to have that conversation ahead of time as to, okay, who's going to be in charge, right, and who's going to rotate their iceberg and deal with other behaviors, right? So you got to figure that one out. However, managers tend to be pretty simpatico because they understand efficiency and they're like, hey, I love that you run your meeting so quickly and we get out of there. In terms of teaching, managers tend to love that style. They go into a classroom, they see someone that's, okay, you need to sit down, you need to do this, 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 and they go, that's a great teacher. That teacher's amazing. Look at how the kids respect that teacher. Very much into respect. And really what they mean by respect tends to be complying with the directions that are being given in a quick, efficient manager style. All right, so analyzers. Analyzers and managers don't tend to get along. It can be very difficult because analyzers need things slow and methodical, and they like details. And managers don't. They tend to want things quick, and quick decisions tend to be the best decisions in their mind. While analyzers, quick decisions tend to be the worst decisions in their mind, so that can be difficult. In terms of teaching, analyzers tend to see manager behaviors in a classroom as just not well thought out. They would say, hey, a manager, they need to spend more time on tools, they need to slow down, because there's more to teaching than just telling kids what to do quickly. Okay, so that tends to be the teaching lens. Stabilizers. Stabilizers and managers, I mean, this is a recipe for disaster. Because a lot of teachers tend to have stabilizer as their preferred behavior style. And managers, well, when they're exploding, dictating, blaming, or even not, even when they're just doing their manager thing, stabilizers take it personally, right? They're like, well, this person just seems mean and cold and harsh, so they don't want to connect with me, and so I don't want to connect with them. And so they tend to avoid each other. When you have an administrator that is a hardcore manager with their behavior style, and they are managing stabilizers, and they're not connecting, they're not making those deep relationships, that's when you end up with a lot of teacher turnover. And the teachers leave and they say, well, it's administrators. That's the problem. When really the issue was a lot of behavior style conflict going on. In terms of teaching, the stabilizer sees managers as very cold in their classroom, right? Gosh, they just don't care about kids, man. They're so harsh. And so that's how they judge them. Persuaders, they also tend to have a hard time with managers. So you're taking a look here, like managers, they got it rough because there's a lot of potential conflicts that can come up. Persuaders like to have fun, right? They like to goof off a bit. They don't want everything to be all business, and the managers just want to do business and leave. And so in terms of teaching, persuaders see managers as just being way too stiff in their classroom, right? They're too rigid, they never have any fun. And so that's that judgment lens. All right, so judgment lens doesn't get us anywhere. So let's take a look at our accept, practice, forgiveness lens. And so as a manager, in order to accept and forgive other managers, it's actually pretty simple. Like I said before, they just have to decide who's in charge. Let someone else be in charge and rotate that iceberg. They'll always agree with their instructional style in the classroom. That's not a problem. Managers love that style. But when they're on a team with another manager, they need to learn to rotate. In terms of analyzers, now here's the thing, analyzers, we're slow, we're methodical, but sometimes things just gotta get done, right? We can't spend 2 weeks thinking about something that's really important. And so as an analyzer, we need to learn from our manager friends, right? We need to learn, okay, sometimes quick, efficient decisions are what we need. And managers tend to make good, quick, efficient decisions. And we need to accept that sometimes they come up with good decisions on the spot. And in terms of a classroom, if you're an analyzer and you don't have manager behaviors, you could have all the tools in the world. You're not going to get kids to do it. So you have to develop your manager behavior in your classroom to make sure kids do the tools. Stabilizers. It's going to be really, really difficult for you to forgive your manager friends. I know you love on kids, and I know relationships are important. I love relationships. Stabilizer is my secondary comfortable behavior style. But if kids love you, but they walk all over you, you're not going to get them to learn. There has to be both respect and love. And so as a stabilizer, if you're busy saying, hey John, have a seat, we really need to get started. Come on, let's go. Oh, Harriet, I know you're upset. You can put your head down. You don't have to learn today. I'm exaggerating this, but stabilizers can love kids in an unhealthy way so that kids don't end up learning. And so we need to embrace our manager behaviors as a stabilizer. And that's going to be really hard to do. They tend to be polar opposite extremes, and I've got some great techniques that I'll show you for you to develop that. Okay, this is something I've been working on for a long time. All right, persuaders. Persuaders, you can't have fun without control. I'm sorry, you just can't. You need to be able to manage, have that manager classroom control, and then have some fun and be able to go back and forth between the two. And the best teachers out there have learned to do that seamlessly. And so let's look at our manager behaviors as being necessary. We need them. All right, finally, working on a team with a manager. The manager's upset, they're blowing up, they're dictating, they're screaming. We have to give them a way out with dignity. How do you give someone that craves control dignity? You give them control. So when managers are upset, give them the control, give them the power. I promise you, they're actually really good at it when they have it, right? They just need to calm down and settle into themselves. They got to be able to make their own decisions. So don't try to manipulate them if they're upset. Okay, if you're an administrator and you are, let's say, administrating someone who's a manager and they're highly upset, don't try to manipulate them into anything. Give them the control, right? Give them, hey, what is the next decision that you think needs to be made? Don't do that personal appeal. It doesn't really work very well, right? Oh, I'm so sorry. Can I give you a hug? It just doesn't work for managers that are exploding and blaming and dictating. It actually can make them a little bit more angry. So, remain professional with them. Let them take the lead. Give them control. And once they have that way out and they have their dignity still, they can calm down and they can rotate freely within their iceberg. In terms of manager behaviors in a classroom, they're very driver focused, right? They are in the driving seat. They're controlling the car. They're not into designing it. They're into driving the car themselves. And so I have a list here of some very clear manager behaviors that we're going to work on. Notice there's not as many, right? Because analyzers, we got tons of tools, but managers, they don't need all that. They have, here's these really quick, efficient things you need to do to control your classroom. You'll notice clear and succinct directions, right? That was also on the analyzers, right? Analyzers, we tend to give directions that are way too long. And so giving directions that are clear and succinct is a manager trait. Getting students to comply with anything is a manager trait. They're just really good at it. A manager can give a student a direction and all of them do it. Versus if you're not comfortable with that and you're a stabilizer giving directions, oh, okay, let's everyone do this now, and half your class isn't doing what you ask. And there's little behaviors and tips and tricks that we can do. I'll show you that you can develop your manager behaviors in the classroom. All right, everyone. So that was a kind of an in-depth look at managers and analyzers, how to work with them on a team. There's so much more we could go into with teamwork, but that's not the point of this series. Maybe one day I'll make another one about getting people to work together in teams. Next time, I'm going to focus on the people side. We're going to learn about stabilizer and persuader behaviors in the same fashion, and the judgment acceptance lens, and just how to manage well in a classroom, how to analyze well in a classroom, how to persuade in a classroom, and how to stabilize in the classroom. All right, I hope you got a lot out of this video. Feel free to leave me comments. Let me know what can I do to make these videos better. I love feedback. As a dominant analyzer, I love it, and I'll listen to your feedback. Otherwise, have an excellent day at school, teaching online, hoping we can get back in person soon. All right, folks, have a great day.